everybody, to the Level Up Your Legacy podcast, where we aim to help you build the legacy you hope to leave one day at a time. And if you're tuning in for the first time today, thank you. Thanks for tuning in. We're excited that you're here. My name is Paul McCosco, and this is Bill Cox. Bill, say what's up.
What is up? Hi, everybody.
We're excited that you joined us. We're both certified coaches with Bill Cox Coaching, and we're excited for today's discussion as we're walking through the book, Boundaries for Leaders, written by Dr. Henry Cloud. So before we get into the meat of today's discussion, Bill, it's been a few months since we've done this podcast, and as with a whole lot of life, there's a whirlwind that sometimes we can get sucked into. And I know you've got a lot going on, and a lot has happened since we've last spoke to our audience. So would you give the listeners, give me a brief update on what's going on? Tell me something you're proud of. Tell me something that you're working on to change, maybe.
Well, I'm proud of my garden, for one thing. It is coming along great. And I typically get really excited about a garden for about the first month. Once I love planning and then seeing everything come up, and then the whole weeding maintenance thing gets really boring. But this year, it's been kind of a cool object lesson personally for me, just to maintain the garden. We're going to be talking about your thinking today, and man, I'll tell you, it's such a great visual for me to compare it to my mind, because I've really worked this year at consistently weeding my garden and cultivating and tilling it. Even where I've had some seeds that didn't germinate and come up, I've replanted, and I've continued to focus on that to where it is not even close. My garden looks better than ever. And you can't find a weed in it. I haven't been out there in a few days because it's been raining, but it looks awesome. I'm really excited about it. And we also just finished renovating my son's house, where he's going to be moving into, and he moved in on Mother's Day. So that was really cool. After several months of working on that thing, my wife had a good cry. She was both excited and sad at the same time, but those are two big highlights from my life.
So you're fixing stuff, you're growing stuff, like, man, new stuff is popping up all over your life, buddy.
Oh, it's such a wonderful time of year. I mean, just the weather's been amazing. Just love being outside, enjoying creation. Yeah, it's been great.
That's awesome. All right, well, let's start talking about the meat of what we're going to get into today. It's been said that we move in the direction of our strongest thoughts. And I believe it. As a man thinketh, so he becomes, the old adage goes. But do we stop to think about what we actually think about? So today we're discussing chapter 6 in Boundaries for Leaders, and it's called The Gatekeeper of Thinking. As you can imagine, what we'll be talking about is examining those thoughts that we think. And more so, are those thoughts serving us? Are they helping us? Are those thoughts keeping us stuck, closing us in? So let's level set. If the title of the chapter is The Gatekeeper Thinking, what do you think of when you hear the word gatekeeper?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. First thought that came to my mind was the Gateway Clipper, which has nothing to do with being a gatekeeper.
It's a paddle boat, right? Yeah,
paddle boat down in Pittsburgh. But I don't think that's going to work. And then my mind went to a series that my wife and I just finished called The Crown, which was a really interesting series on the English crown and the Queen. And the gatekeepers, those Royal British soldiers that stand guard. But I think what I finally landed on was the character from Thor, the character that Idris Elba plays, Heimdall, and the protector. Well, I guess Thor's the protector of the 9 realms, but Heimdall has these special capabilities that allow him to sense and see things, that threats to Asgard that nobody can see, and his job is to be the gatekeeper of the Bifrost Bridge, so that nothing can come in to threaten the safety of the people of Asgard. So I'd also learned that Idris Elba absolutely hated that role, but I digress.
Neither here nor there.
I think he plays a great part. I love his part in that movie, but
That's it. Well, I love that you said you spot the threats from far away and you keep them
yeah,
from coming in. Wow.
yeah,
I think that's a fantastic definition of gatekeeper. So
yeah.
Dr. Henry Cloud talks about how leaders are the gatekeeper of the thinking for their organization. So he says this, he says, anticipating outcomes, how we think, right? Either positive or negative, causes different chemical reactions in our brain. Anticipating good outcomes produces dopamine, which helps the brain be awake and interested, energized and ready to deal with problems, right? That's how we want our people to think. That's how we want to think. It says, on the contrary, negative thinking causes the brain to freeze up and not work as we'd like it to. And when negative thinking continues, we drift into this learned helplessness. Maybe to go back to your garden analogy, that's when the weeds start popping up and taking over the good thoughts. So we start to feel like we are unable to control our situation. We're unable to change what's happening, and we get stuck, and a bunch of other bad things happen. And Dr. Martin Seligman, who, Dr. Henry Cloud quotes a lot, he starts talking about there's this 3 P's that come, 3 P's of negative thinking. So let's, in the spirit of trying to figure out if we have those 3 P's, let's talk about what they are. What are those 3 P's of learned helplessness? And how do we know if we've adopted a thinking style that incorporates them?
Well, I mean, the 3 P's are pretty powerful. He talks about them as being personal, pervasive, and permanent. And when I read through these, personal, he explains it in relationship to himself in a negative direction. I am such a lousy salesperson. I am a loser. So it's almost like it's self-identification. It's like who I am. It's related to my own personal identity. Then the second one, pervasive, instead of being like an isolated event, now I begin to see it everywhere in my life. It's not just one situation or one client, for example, but no, it's all my clients. This happens.
Quality.
Yeah, exactly. And then permanent is this whole idea of it's never going to change. And man, when you put those 3 things together, you can see how you create this mindset for yourself where you feel helpless, but it's learned. I love the concept of learned helplessness. Earlier in the chapter, I think he hits on something that's really good. In fact, I always want to read this. From the point at which we're born, we actually, when we start life, we learn that we have a lot of agency and efficacy, that we have a lot of personal power. Even talks about the fact as a baby, when you cry, what happens? Well, if you have any kind of a decent parent at all, you cry and your parents come to the rescue. You get fed, or you get your diaper changed, or whatever.
Get cuddled.
Your mother, your mother, it takes you away from that scary family member with a beard who just made you cry like I do. I have that effect on a lot of kids, but you learn early on that I can do something and it will affect change, which I often talk about this concept, that because our brains are wired for self-protection, a lot of our thoughts, the average person thinks between 12 and 60,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those tend to be negative, and 95% of those 80 tend to be repetitive. And you think about that and you're like, well, why is that? Well, part of it is because your brain's job at below the level of consciousness is to protect you and to keep you safe, to be that gatekeeper, right? That like the gatekeeper for your physical life. But what happens sometimes is those things that aren't actually real threats, over time they can become perceived threats. And then we can become the kind of people that just kind of developed this negative self-protective outlook in life. And it happens subtly. We don't even realize it's happening. And then things happen throughout our life that reaffirm those experiences, and our whole mindset, our mental map, our view of the world starts to take on this learned helplessness that Seligman talks about. And I know from a personal level, this about me, thinking positively is not something I do naturally. I struggle with this a lot. I'm literally looking at my Penzu journal right now.
Hmm.
And like, think about the affirmations that I just read this morning. I'm looking at quotes, affirmations that help me fight for a positive mindset. I'm looking at quotes from a book that I read 2 years ago by Craig Groeschel called Winning the War in Your Mind, because I really struggle with this area. Couple of these quotes: think about what you think about. What you are today as a result of your thoughts in the past. Who you become in the future will reflect what you think about today. Your mind will control you, so you have to control your mind. And those are some of the big thoughts from the book. And it's a big part of I would say it's one of my biggest challenges in life. I think some people, because of the families that they grow up in, maybe even their personalities, they have more of a positive, optimistic outlook in life. And other people, like myself, whether it's life experiences, I've dealt a lot with insecurity, the way I see myself, struggle with have more of a natural negative, pessimistic outlook on life. And I think it just varies from person to person, but my, oh my, in coaching, this is one of the most fundamental issues, challenges that all leaders face, like our mindset, the mental game, the inner game that takes place. And then going back to what you said, I'm the gatekeeper for the team. So whatever mindset I'm bringing to the team, that is having a disproportionate impact on the greater mindset of the team itself. So if I'm seeing some unhealthy, negative thinking on the team, some toxic thoughts there, then I've got to really look in the mirror and say, whoa, okay, to what degree am I influencing that? And you help me with this on a regular basis. We were just having a conversation yesterday, literally, through a company we're working with to help improve our lead generation process. And it's hard work. And that's, for me, when I kind of start having some of those toxic thoughts that I have to battle through. I've got a file in my Penzu journal that says it's called my toxic thought bucket. of all the thoughts that I struggle with on a regular basis to overcome.
Well, I think you just dropped some gold on us. You might not have even realized it, but you said the thoughts I battle through. When a little bit ago, you said I have to fight to keep a positive mindset. And I think when I think of a gatekeeper, I think very much reactive. Something's come to the gate. I'm saying, nope, not today. You're not coming in. But man, what you're describing is a proactive, like, no, I'm pushing away. I am actively working to fight to keep a great mindset. And it's like, wow, that takes a whole new dynamic of gatekeeper, that I'm pushing into positivity instead of just trying to keep negativity out. Like, that's a game changer, Bill. That's awesome.
Well, to me, that's it. If I'm not being proactive about cultivating a positive mindset, a healthy mindset, and I'm not talking about living in a Pollyanna world here, but I'm talking about fighting for thoughts that are going to lead to a healthier, more vibrant life, where you can show up in conversations, in relationships, as a person who's more peaceful, centered, focused on others, joyful, open, seeing the possibilities in life, being grateful. Like, that's the kind of person I want to show up as. And naturally, it's not. I mean, that's just the truth about me. And I've got to work at it all the time, like literally all the time. From our conversation yesterday, I stepped back and like, oh man, I still have so much work to do here. And I've got to exercise real discipline. Sometimes you have to read these affirmations, and affirmations are nothing than a statement of belief about the kind of mindset that you want to have about any area of your life. You've got to speak those things. You've got to regularly think about those things so that over time, again, thoughts are habitual, right? So just like we have negative thoughts that have become habits in our mind, we can create new habits. I think that's the cool thing about this chapter. Your helplessness was learned. That means you can learn efficacy. You can learn agency. You can learn to take control of your thoughts. You can become empowered in your thinking, but it takes work and it takes practice and it takes repetitively, first of all, knowing what those toxic thoughts are, becoming aware of those and the impact they're having on your life, and then learning how to replace those with something more redemptive, more healthy, more positive.
Well, and to go back to your garden analogy, you're doing the hard work of uprooting those negative weeds. You're
Yeah.
clearing your garden. And what happens? The crops start to grow. It takes a while.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
start to see the harvest come to fruition and good things happen. And so that's the pull power
Yeah.
that gives you the perseverance to keep uprooting that negative thought, getting rid of that bad mindset, and knowing that a harvest is going to come because that's what you're cultivating for. So
Yeah, that's such a great analogy. And even like, just as much as it's important to get rid of the weeds, and this is an analogy that James Allen uses in his classic As a Man Thinketh. He compares our mind to a garden, and essentially stuff's going to grow in there. That's axiomatic.
you don't have to plant the weeds; they just come up.
No, they're going to, something is going to grow in that garden, and you can control what's going to grow there and what's not going to grow there. So yeah, not only the uprooting and the pulling of the weeds, but also like continually planting of the seeds.
Wow.
And it takes a while to get those seeds to grow. Sometimes they don't grow. So you got to replant and just continue to nurture that. So that over time, you can begin to see those changes take place.
Wow. And Dr. Cloud said something that was in an interview a while back. I heard he said the greatest predictor that you're going to hit your goal is belief that you actually can. So the ability for yourself to envision the fact that you can complete what you set out to complete, like having that positive mindset that you can control certain things before you, will help you actually achieve that goal, and that's really taking every thought captive. That's believing in yourself and believing for that harvest that's eventually going to come.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of an application, just what we're talking about now for you as a leader for your team, there's a couple of things. One, you should start with yourself. Keep a journal, like mine, my toxic thought bucket. Like, just keep track of, do a mental inventory at the end of each day and ask yourself, like, what defined the narrative that was running inside my brain? All of us have a inner color commentator, who analyzes what's going on in life and then makes value judgments about all of those things. And so, like, just write down, what were the pervasive thoughts that defined my experience today? Just write those down. See what that reveals. Do that for a week. And then you could take that out to your team, like do a team. This is one thing he talks about in the chapter. Do a team audit. When's the last time you literally sat your team down? You could share this chapter, talk about this chapter, teach on this chapter. One of the best things you can do as a leader is teach stuff. Read some paragraphs out of this chapter to your team. Talk about the 3 Ps that Seligman wrote about, and then have the team do a team mental audit. What have been some of the defining mindsets around how we view performance, how we think about our clients, what we believe about the economy and inflation, and all these things, what we think about our people, our team, our employees, and just make a list on a whiteboard, see what that reveals, and see where your team is at right now on this continuum. Are you more optimistic in your mindset, or is your team really struggling with more of a toxic mental team mindset? And how is that impacting your business?
I love those. Those are great practical applications. So why don't we park it there today? So you can start with yourself, maybe keep a journal, right? Where you start to think about what you're thinking about. What are those defining mindsets in your mind? And then if you're a team leader, maybe do a team audit. You said, talk about the 3 Ps with your team. Write out what are those defining mindsets on your team. Consider what the team thinks about each other even. Those are great practical steps. Cloud closes the chapter by saying this. He says, there are 2 kinds of people in this world: people whose circumstances overcome them, and people who overcome their circumstances. So what kind of person are you? What kind of person do you hope to be? Leader, maybe the greatest thing you can do today is to start thinking about what you think about. So next week, we're going to be talking about control and results, and more specifically, reversing the destruction, carving new neural pathways if some of those 3 Ps have kind of crept in. So I hope you'll come back and join us. And as we close the day, I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll make a recording of this podcast available to our viewers later on. So if you've not signed up for our weekly emails, make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com and sign up. And we hope you've enjoyed today's discussion. Tag someone in this post, maybe share it with someone if they'd find it helpful as well. And until next time, this is Paul McCosco and Bill Cox saying so long for now on the Level Up Your Legacy podcast.
Bye, everybody. Hey, thanks again for watching today's video. And before you go, subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you go to billcoxcoaching.com. Sign up for our regular newsletter to help you move from success to significance and lead your life in such a way that you live a legacy. Have a great day.